But let's get to segment 3. That is our team of the week, and that is Dan Lanning, also known as the Danimal. And he's known as the Danimal for a lot of different reasons, not only because of the on-field success that Oregon is having this season, the only loss coming to number 1 Georgia, but also the recruiting success. The Ducks ranked number 10 in the country per the 24/7 Sports composite team rankings. They are also number 1 in the Pac-12 in the recruiting rankings. And Drew, you got to like what the Oregon Ducks are doing on the trail. What are your initial takeaways when you look at this class?
I love what they are doing in terms of rebuilding that front seven. Right now, they got 4 defensive linemen committed. They got 3 edge rushers and a linebacker. And Cooper, we always talk about it with the Pac-12. There's not a lot of big bodies out there on the West Coast. You kind of have to go hunting for these individuals. And Dan Lanning and his staff are doing just that. You have to feel good if you're an Oregon fan about the future of that pass rush. And I know you're going to get into the quarterback here, Dante Moore. But I think if you're building out a championship roster, you need 2 things, a quarterback and then guys that can get after the quarterback. And Dan Lanning is doing that there at Oregon. I also think it's impressive them pushing a little bit into SEC country. Currently have a commitment right there in Mississippi. I think they're also in on some other guys. So Dan Lanning, we didn't know what he would do. Guy that didn't have much ties to the West Coast or that far out west. He's off to a good start on the field, and I think what he's doing when it comes to talent acquisition and recruiting is just as impressive.
I'm going to piggyback off what you said about the geography of what Dan Lanning is doing. 13 different states represented in this 22-player class right now, but 9 of the 13 states come from the West Coast, and I think that's really important. I think for Dan Lanning, a guy with a lot of his roots in the southeastern part of the United States, it would have been easy with Oregon's national brand to start drifting east of the Mississippi. So I think he's doing a really good job staying home and getting most of Oregon's talent from that West Coast footprint, and having to go down to Mississippi to get a guy like Dante Daddle certainly makes a lot of sense. So I think Oregon on the right track there. Marshall Malkow leading the charge off the field, a guy that has a lot of experience. If you don't know about him, one of Dan Lanning's biggest acquisitions, leading that personnel department over there, worked for Chris Peterson at the University of Washington. So certainly a guy that knows that footprint really well. So I really like what they're doing there. But Drew, the biggest takeaway for me is if you're going to win in today's college football and you're going to win at the highest level, you got to have the guy at the quarterback position. And there is no question that Oregon and Dan Lanning has that in Dante Moore, the number 2 player in the top 247, a guy that I absolutely love, that I think is going to be ready from day one to start and compete in Eugene. I think this guy, not only from a physical skill set standpoint, but just from an intangible standpoint as well, he is ready-made, one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the country. You talk about a guy that takes care of the football at a really high level and doesn't turn the ball over. Oregon is littered with talent on the perimeter. They're building that backfield as well. I think they're only getting stronger on the offensive line. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Josh Connolly, the number 1 offensive tackle in the country last year. They win that recruitment late in the process. So Dan Lanning doing a really good job. This roster has a very solid foundation, but if you don't have that guy at the quarterback position, then it's all for naught. We talked about the importance of that with Notre Dame, how they're building a really good roster foundation, but the quarterback position remains a question. I think Kenny Dillingham, Dan Lanning, they all deserve a lot of credit to be able to go out there and get one of the best arms in the country in Dante Moore. But Drew, let's start off with our headliners in the class. And since we're already talking about him already, a couple pro comps for us. But Dante Moore, is there a guy that he reminds you of?
Donovan McNabb. And I know someone on our recruiting team threw this one out to me a few months ago, and I was like, And then I had a chance when I had the flu 2 weeks ago to watch a Dante Moore game in length with all the commercials, all the timeouts. And I was like, man, this guy does remind me of Donovan McNabb. He's got one of probably the strongest arms in the class. He throws an excellent deep ball, and I think he just elevates the play of others around him. When I watched that game, Cass Tech versus King, Dante Moore, I think every snap was low, and he shrugged it off and kept playing. I think he moves in the pocket very similar to McNabb, who was a star at Syracuse, obviously had a productive career there in the NFL and was a first-round pick. But I saw a lot of similarities. I think if you're an Oregon fan, what gets you excited is me and you, Cooper, and everyone else, Brandon Huffman, Greg Biggins, we keep telling you how good Dante Moore is. And if you just watch Bo Nix, who was cast away from Auburn, just absolutely light up UCLA, I'd be licking my chops about what Kenny Dillingham, what Dan Lanning, what they're going to do with Dante Moore, who we think could play from day one. So guy to be super excited about. I think he just makes everyone around him better. I think he makes everyone in that huddle feel more confident. And I'm very confident that he's going to win some games there in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I love the way he leads. The comp for me was Dak Prescott, more of the Dak Prescott that we've seen as of recently in Dallas, not the Dak Prescott that we saw under Dan Mullen in Starkville at Mississippi State. I think this is more of a guy that comps to a very comfortable passer. And like I said, very cerebral, can play at all three levels, very accurate, knows how to change pace, change velocities, which I think is a very important skill set for a quarterback, plays with touch. And I think a guy that's very experienced. When you watch Dante Moore, to me, how he differentiates himself from the rest of the quarterback class, which we have called very deep, talented, and sometimes even very special. I think Dante Moore is the one guy right now. If you had to take a guy today to suit up and win a football game on Friday night, it would be Dante Moore. And we've talked about the reps that he's had, the experience, his ability to take care of the football. And Drew, I think you said it, his ability to elevate the talent around him. And sometimes that's as simple as it is. When you have all the surrounding talents, you just need a guy in the middle to make it go. I think that's exactly what Dante Moore is. But Drew, another guy that Dante Moore is going to be throwing the ball to for years to come, that is Jurion Dickey, and a guy that has really exploded in the rankings for us over the offseason. Now a household name in the top 247, the number 2 receiver in the top 247, but a guy that we love out of the state of California, Dan Lanning and company. Very smart Junior Adams receivers coach over there in Eugene to lock up Jurion Dickey early in this process, as a lot of suitors have come knocking, but it seems that he is solid with the Ducks. And Drew, from the beginning, I've been pretty steadfast on this one. He has reminded me of A.J. Brown, big physical receiver that kind of can get what he wants when he wants. Kind of basketball skill set, 50-50 ball catcher, but very physical at the point of attack as a pass catcher, and then also with the ball in his hands. He can beat you a lot of different ways. So I love the addition of a Jurion Dickey, and if you're an Oregon fan, you got to be salivating at the fact that Dante Moore and Jurion Dickey are going to be playing football together for the years to come.
Coop, I love that comp so much. I didn't even really want to write one down. I wrote Treylon Burks here, but I just was going to go and defer to you, A.J. Brown, because I think it just fits. If you've seen A.J. Brown play on Sundays, picture that. That is Jurion Dickey. I loved him out at the OT7 event. Everyone's like, oh, it's 7-on-7. Why does this stuff matter? Well, the cream of the crop rises to the top, right? The best of the best make plays, and Jurion Dickey was on a loaded 7-on-7 team, the Miami Immortals, and I don't think anyone at that tournament ran a better post corner route. That guy just consistently got open. I agree 100%. We're talking about Oregon, the future of that program. Kenny Dillingham, Dan Lanning, what are they going to do? Well, they got QB1 in Dante Moore, and then they got wide receiver 1 in Jurion Dickey. And I think he's a guy that you can do a variety of different things. You could put him at H-back if you wanted to. I mean, he's over 200 pounds, but he still runs a 4.5 on the lasers. I just think he's a dude. He's excellent after the catch. Super excited to see him. And again, that A.J. Brown comp, ooh, chef's kiss, Cooper. That's a good one.
A lot of firepower in this class offensively, so we're going to stay on the offensive side of the ball. But the next guy, Drew, another riser for us, Kenyon Sadiq out of the state of Idaho, a guy that you could label as a receiver or kind of more as an H-back flex tight end, but a guy that is certainly dynamic and I think is going to enter the fold almost immediately. He's going to be a hard guy to keep off the field, hovering around 6'3", 225 pounds. This is a guy that ran a sub-11 1 in the 100-meter, and a guy that is very dynamic as a pass catcher, but I love his versatility as a inline blocker as well, Drew. I think you can line him up in the backfield. I love this guy. My comp for him was Jonnu Smith, who's now with the New England Patriots, played his ball at Florida International, third-round pick back in 2017. Evan Ingram also was a name that kind of popped up with the Jacksonville Jaguars, Ole Miss before that. But, Drew, I love Kenyon Sadiq. Gives this Kenny Dillingham passing offense just another tool in the toolkit that they're going to be very hard to defend.
Oh, you said wide receiver, tight end. How about just like a chess piece, a guy that you can move around and figure out different ways to get the football? No, John Smith, glad you gave out our group of five brothers, FIU, a little shout out there. I actually saw him earlier this year at a camp working there. And, when you see him at first glance, he's not the biggest guy, but it's those individuals that are so good at moving around and catching the football and being under control. Those are the scary mismatches, the guys that you can move around. And I think Sadiq is just that. Coop, I think that comp works. I think another one, Isaiah Likely. I said this in the before when we were talking about Sadiq moving up in the rankings. What about like Taysom Hill, who's also calls the state of Idaho home? I mean, these are guys you just move around, figure out ways to get them the football, and they make plays. So another great addition. We're going to keep talking about it. I said I like how Oregon built out the front seven. I also like the skill pieces that they got there committed on offense. So a really, really good recruiting class and one that's pretty balanced.
Credit to Dan Lanning, the job that he's done since he's gotten to Oregon. And Mario Cristobal did a really good job at that program before, but he has kind of taken the baton and continued to extend the lead out west, and Lincoln Riley, USC, continuing to get things going on the recruiting trail. But the job that he has done deserves a lot of credit. Kenny Dillingham as well on the offensive end. Tosh Lupoy getting it done defensively as well. So a lot to like with the Oregon Ducks. But, Drew, now we're going to go to the part where we highlight a commit that's maybe not getting as much love nationally. I know you got a guy in mind here.
Yeah, I did, and I wish I had a little more time pre-production to find the notes I had on him. But it's Bryce Bolton, an offensive lineman out of Palm Desert, California. This is a kid that went to their Saturday night live camp and basically earned him a spot in the class. And he's a little bit on the smaller side, but I've seen some of his workout videos in the past, and he was actually kind of like on my freaks list watch list. I just like the way he bend. I like his mobility, his ability, how he can get to the second level. So, Mario Cristobal did not leave that offensive line cupboard bare in any way, but I think Oregon's going to need to continue to build out the trenches, and I like what they've gotten in Bryce. He's going to be a guy that's, number 18, 19, 20 in the class, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was a starter for the Oregon Ducks at some point down the line, maybe 2024, 2025. I think he's got that type of ceiling.
Drew, I'm going to give the defense some love for the first time here, and I'm going to go with safety commit Tyler Turner out of the state of Texas in San Antonio. This guy is a sub 6 foot, 185-pound guy. You watch the tape this year. He's playing pretty much predominantly at the second level as a linebacker, off-ball guy, speed and space guy, a lot of range, very good key and diagnose ability. But this is kind of what we talk about all the time, a modern NFL type of backer, and especially when you're playing in the Pac-12, you're going to see offenses from Chip Kelly and Kalen DeBoer, guys that are going to spread you out. So you need guys that can run and are versatile, hold up in the run game, in the passing game as well. We talked about that versatility in the passing game of a Kenyon Sadiq. Well, on the opposite side of the field, defensively, I think Tosh Lupoy gets a defensive playmaker, and a guy like Tyler Turner is a big pickup for Dan Lanning. So really like that a lot. Oregon continuing to get it done on the trail. So, Drew, we're going to nitpick here a little bit. If there's one part of the class that makes you say, hey, maybe there should be a little bit more attention here, or they just haven't addressed it yet, is there something that sticks out for you there?
I don't know if it really applies to the 2023 cycle, but maybe 2024 and beyond. Are they going to be able to keep adding these elite skill players, right? Oregon is still in the Pac-12. What happens when UCLA, USC, they move to the Big Ten? We see the SEC and the Big Ten just become these bigger and bigger conferences. I think Oregon needs to keep selling kids on the fact that they can get to the NFL out of Oregon. You can do it. You can make it. You can be a high draft selection. So we saw Troy Franklin. He went off. He was Bo Nix's top target against UCLA this past Saturday. I need to think that they need to keep that going in my eyes. And I think a big test for how these things go. Dante Dowdle, the running back out of Mississippi, Ole Miss, they have been circling that one, trying to get him on campus. Can they hang on there? I think Oregon probably will, but in my eyes, that would be a monster get for them, a running back. We talked about wide receiver 1, quarterback 1, chess piece number 1. Well, Dante Dowdle would be running back number 1. So you got to keep that guy in the boat, if you ask me.
Good point there. I'm going to go defense again. To me, it's more about the second level. And trust me, this was something that we were trying to solve when I was at Oregon under Mario Cristobal. But a few weeks ago, Blake Nicholson, top 247 linebacker out of Northern California, commits to Mike Norvell in Florida State. And if I had to guess, Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoy is still working on him, especially after the last couple of weeks that Florida State has had. But I think you got to get that second level right. Noah Sewell could be out on his way to be playing on Sundays here pretty soon. Justin Flo has not shown an ability to stay healthy. I like Jeffrey Bassa a lot, but that is a position that they need to improve. I think they've done a really good job on the defensive line. I think they've done a good job on the back end. But if you are nitpicking and there's one area that they got to improve defensively, it would be at the second level. But Drew, let's finish this thing off for the Oregon Ducks. One piece left, one piece for the Oregon Ducks as they are trying to put the cherry on top of the cake here. Who is that one guy that maybe you can see Oregon adding that you could really say, okay, Oregon taking the next step in this class, in the class of 2023?
I think it's DJU's brother, Mateo Ugalele, who's there at St. John Bosco, I think if they can add, a premium pass rusher to what they already have committed in that front seven, that's the icing on the cake. That's the cherry on top for me. That signals, hey, we are for real. We can go head to head with Alabama and Ohio State for a kid in California. And again, talk him into playing into the Pac-12. So I think the younger Ugalele would be a monster statement for them. And he's a guy that I think could play early on. And you see what Dan Lanning's done in the past with his defenses. I think he could eat in that system.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I would love the addition of a guy like Mateo Uiagalelei to be in Dan Lanning's defense, in Tosh Lupoy's defense. He'd really have a chance to excel there. I think on the offensive side, I look at a guy like Samson Okunlola. I mentioned earlier in the show the number one offensive tackle in the country in last year's cycle, Josh Connerly, how big of a get that was for Oregon in the Ducks. If they can add a guy like Samson Okunlola, if you can imagine those guys bookend playing opposite of each other, that would give Oregon a formidable tackle combination for years to come. And right now, Samson Okunlola was a guy that we thought was favoring Miami. That still might be the case. Miami is struggling right now, and you wonder if a team like Oregon or someone else can take advantage of that. And listen, I got a lot of respect for Dan Lanning, the job that he does on the recruiting trail. I think he has assembled a very good recruiting staff. I think he is good for one or two surprises a year. They pulled that out of the hat last year. We saw that with Josh Connerly. I would not be surprised if he does that again. Also, Spencer Fano, top 247 offensive lineman out of Utah. They're in the mix for him as well. So I keep an eye on that. But for everything Oregon, that is our breakdown of the Oregon Ducks. Like I said, the number 10 class in the country under Dan Lanning, 22 commitments from 13 different states, the number one class in the Pac-12. Good time to be a Ducks fan, man, as they are looking to make a move and hopefully get into the college football playoff, which would be a heck of a statement under Dan Lanning.